Okay, everybody. So I've got 12:01. So I'm going to go ahead and get started introducing our speaker for today. And as people come in, I'll just admit them. And so today we've got Mike Porter. He's the director of e-learning at the VCU College of Health Professions. Previously, he's held positions within the VCU School of Pharmacy and the Alt Lab. His professional interests include technology, enhanced active learning, accessibility and inclusion, and engagement-focused online curriculum design. Today, we're here to talk about learning or leading the learning in a video conference session. And so I'm going to let Mike take it away. I'll be monitoring the chat. So if at any point something you need to say something or you want to ask something and you don't want to interrupt, you can go ahead and throw it in there, but we will just see how it goes. Okay.
Appreciate that, Stacy. Thank you. And then, yes, I'm sure people will come in and out as we go, and that's perfectly all right. I said I appreciate the introduction, and for everyone here, the kind of, if I synthesize down what we're trying to achieve here with this session, really, yes, we'll be looking at Zoom somewhat specifically, since we know that many of you can utilize that. But how do you take a session like this? How do you teach a teaching experience and get people more involved, so that it's not just passive, that it's not just, I'm going to listen. You really want to ask yourself, can you make it so that they'd rather be there in person than watch this as a recording? And so we're going to look at a few ways to do that today, both on the, strategy side, and then some of the tools and how those things mesh. Before we get started with that, though, want to just establish sort of, norms and processes for this event. So first off, in terms of communication, audio communication is fine by me. Interruptions, I'm good with interruptions in presentations. So if you have a question and you just want to say something, turn your mic on. That works well for me. If you'd prefer to put something in the chat, you're welcome to do that as well. I'm not always the best at catching the chat questions right away. So maybe the more non-pressing questions go to the chat. Anything that just pops in your head, use the microphone if you'd like. I encourage the use of cameras, but completely understand the reasons why we wouldn't have them on. So if you want to have your camera on, you're welcome to. No worries either way. And then the last thing I want to make note of here is names. So if you do use the microphone, if you can state your first name, just so I know who I'm speaking to. And with that, I wanted to point out that if you would like to change your name the way it's presented here in Zoom, you can do so. You can click on participants, and then from participants, you should see yourself. And if you click on more, you'll have an option to put a profile picture, but also rename yourself. So if you have a name of preference that's not showing up in Zoom right now, go ahead and make that change. So, sometimes it'll just have your email, your full name, and you just want to go by something else. You can go make that change. That can be changed in every meeting too. It doesn't have to be persistent across the way. So just wanted to put that out there, so that we are kind of all on the same page. And with that, I'm going to share in the chat document. This is sort of our guiding document for today. It's a link tree. You know what? I don't think I shared the right one. That was a lesson plan. Don't read that. How about the second one? Here we go. This is the one you're looking for. So with the link tree, this is basically just the different tools we're going to be using today. We're going to touch on a lot of different things. I see that we have a few people from VCU Health here. You may not have complete access to all these resources. We've opened it up within Virginia Commonwealth University, but sometimes those don't always get to all the users. If that's the case, we'll find some ways to get these to you, but it's not critical that you can access all the items. We're going to be really just flexible with how we roll today. So that should give you all the links, because we'll go pretty fast with it, and also some things to go back to afterwards. I do want to mention a couple of links on here. The one is, there is a link. It's the fourth link down. It says Jamboard notes and feedback. I'm going to go ahead and share the screen on that one. If you're not familiar with Jamboard, it is a free whiteboard software through Google, and you should be able to go on here and add notes. So you can just go ahead, you can hit a sticky note, you can write something, so you can say hello. and then you can move your notes around. You can also do open text and draw images. There's a couple of different pages to this right now. There's a questions page and there's a notes page. This is just something to try out. During this session, if you have questions you want to leave that are more persistent, put your questions here. It's something I can answer even after the session. And the notes is just something that collaboratively, you as a group can put down some notes and ideas so that you can all kind of learn from each other and have that one set of notes as opposed to a individual sets. Don't have to use this, but want to give an outlet here for communication as we get going. Any questions there before we kind of roll into things? We kind of went through a lot of table setting. Okay. So the first thing I want to do then is you'll see a link on here for your Answer Garden poll. This is the Answer Garden. I'll put this link directly in the chat as well if you're not able to access the document. And what I'm looking for here is a single word. What is your biggest challenge with teaching over video conference? I threw some words in there just as an idea starter, but don't need to use those. You can, or you can use other words as well. So you're just thinking, what is that major challenge that might be there? And I will stop the share for a second, but if you want to go to that poll, enter in your answer, and then we'll kind of look at the results as well. I see a few people adding it to the Zoom chat. If you can't add it to the Answer Garden, it'll give us more of a visual interpretation, but again, we can go with it either way. Okay, and I will share that again. And give it a refresh here and see where it stands. Okay, so we got a few terms up here. I just want to take a look at this. Again, feel free to jump in with a conversation on this. I think there can be a lot of challenges depending on what you're actually facing your task with, if it's a smaller audience, a larger audience, students, peers, etc. But you see that engagement obviously is a big need. It's probably why you're here. Some other things there, just the sort of lack of connection with people. So the distance to that, feeling kind of fall away. Feedback being a concern. You might present something, but without those verbal or nonverbal cues, it's sometimes difficult to tell if people understand, or you're trying to focus on too many screens at once. So that can be a bit of a challenge. So let me grab this. There we got another emphasis and feedback. So we'll jump into that for a second here, because I'm curious. For those of you who mentioned feedback, have there been any feedback strategies that you've tried so far, or where have you seen the gap in feedback that maybe makes that considered to be a big challenge?
So I often find that I feel like I'm teaching into the void. And so assessing understanding is what's difficult for me, because I'll say something, be like, do you understand? And then there's that pause.
Yeah, and I think that the tough part about that is, especially if your audience changes quite a bit. It's, sometimes you start to know your audience, and it's no different than in person. You'll know, groups that are more willing to share answers versus those that are not. And then you start to adjust to that, so that, in some you don't have to say very little and it'll just jump in. Others, you might need to do more formal prompting. Like you said, we want everyone to submit something and then kind of guide through until that spark is there. But you do certainly have that portion where you're just speaking and you're hoping that there's some sort of response coming back. Other thoughts there before we move into the some of the strategies?
This is John, and I know that I'm making it harder by having my camera off, but I may have to run away at any moment because it's lunchtime in a house with kids.
Not a worry.
But I feel like engagement and feedback all get to the same problem, which is that it seems like, and I'm a faculty member, but whether I'm teaching or working with other faculty in my unit, nobody likes to say anything on the camera or off. And I don't know why. And so regardless of the type of feedback you're trying to get, it's often easier to ignore it, I think, when you're on a kind of in a virtual classroom.
Absolutely, John. And I think that, you're talking about ignoring it, and this is just a hard thing to do, is like the chat, for example. Like someone may not want to be on camera or on microphone, so they'll put something in the chat, but it's different than if you were in a face-to-face situation where someone spoke out or raised their hand. It's easier to ignore to the point that it's delayed. So you're right. Sometimes that sort of feedback is not as responsive. And then, if someone has a negative experience with it, they're not there. And yeah, your point, John, about nodding is exactly what we're talking about. Is that it can be challenging there. So, when we're talking about it today, these aren't perfect solutions, but it's like different steps you can take to maybe find what works for your particular audience, or create an environment that's more welcoming. Nothing's a panacea here. Okay, so I'm going to transition to some slides. We're going to go back and forth on these pretty quick. They are on the link tree, the Leading the Learning slides, if you're interested in having those for your reference. But I'm going to go ahead and put those up on the shared screen so we can all work along together. Let's see. Okay, obviously our initial slide. Let's get started though. We're going to cover this in 3 areas today. We're going to look at just general best practices that will cover just, working in the video conference environment. Then we'll look at some tools and techniques. And lastly, go through the sort of class considerations before class, during class, after class, and what those might look like. I know for a fact that we won't have time to kind of go hands-on with all the tools that I'd like to. So we'll touch as many as we can to give you some experience there if you haven't had it already. This first thing I wanted to mention, though, is just, knowing your system. And it's not only just knowing your video conferencing system. So whether you're using Zoom or Google Meets or, whatever it might be, know the system, what it can do, what tools it has, and know what device you're going to be on. It's kind of like knowing your classroom or knowing what room you're presenting in. It really helps you feel comfortable in that environment. So if you're going to be using a computer different than your own, is there a chance for you to test that ahead of time? I put on here just in Zoom, can you check which camera you want to use, which microphone you want to use? Have you done a dry run, just to make sure that you kind of understand your system and what that might look like? Knowing your room and environment matters a lot as well. There's some links in the tree about lighting and different effects. If you're backlit and you're a shadow the whole time, that's going to create a different perspective for students than if you're properly lit. I have the light on in this room right now. I hate artificial light. I work in the dark all the time, except for when I'm on one of these calls, because I know that overall it provides a better viewing experience. You get to see me up close and personal. So kind of knowing that is important. Similarly, think about if you were in an actual room and where you are physically and what that means in terms of opening up for the conversation. To the best of your ability, you optimize your on-screen position. So I'm going to practice a few of these and we'll go back to the slides in a second, but, really try to emphasize being up close and present, speaking to the audience. So I'm directly speaking to you. I'm not talking to some part of my computer, but I'm recognizing where those faces are. If I'm to sit back here, I really don't look like present. I'm in a large lecture hall. It's not as effective. I don't need to be like on you, but close enough is good. Another thing, is some people teach like this, because they're looking at a different screen. Well, I get it. My screen's to the side as well. The audience isn't as good, or the audio isn't as good, and you can tell they're not speaking to that audience. you know, John mentioned before that the checking for cues on people. Well, even if they have their cameras on, if I'm turned this way, I'm not seeing them. So, you know, syncing up the camera with what you're looking at is really helpful. If you're to share your screen, yes, you're going to become small that side. So what you've probably noticed me doing throughout this presentation is turning my share screen off. Use it when you want to share the slides, and then turn it off when you want to speak to the audience, as much as you're comfortable doing that. You can partner that up with providing the slides. So in this case, you know, I gave you the link to the slides. So if students said, well, I really want to have the slides to follow along, I said, well, you do have those. But when I'm speaking, I'm going to speak to you. I'm not going to speak to you in a small box. I kind of, we practiced this a bit at the beginning, but the establishment of norms. Now, if this was a class situation, we had multiple sessions, I would have engaged with you to help create these norms. And this is something you can create over several sessions. You know, people may not be willing to share their opinions initially, or they're not sure what they want. But, you know, ask everyone, what do we want to do? What is the chat for? What is the audio for? Do you want these recorded, or is there a level of discomfort there? You know, that willingness to ask questions can really be stripped away when you said, well, all your questions are going to be put on a recording and then shared out. So you might set a norm saying that we're going to record this portion of the course of the session, and then this will not be recorded. You know, the use of names and calling people by their names, you know, are we allowing that? So establish those norms up front. It creates a comfort saying, you know, I'm kind of valuing your experience here as well. And, you know, you can always guide it that, you know, some people may want certain communication. You say, well, we've got 200 people in the room, so it has to be different than 5, but we want to work through that. And probably a term that, you know, you've heard nonstop the last year, but flexibility when it comes to, you know, conferences is often flexibility when it comes to 100% compliance and recognizing differences in technology. You know, an inflexible approach here would be saying, well, if you don't have your camera on, if you don't have a working camera, you can leave. Or, you know, I was going to sit there and wait until 100% of people answered the answer garden. I don't even know how many of you answered it. It wasn't the point. The idea was to generate conversation elements and to get started with it. Some may not be able to access all the resources. We'll get those there, but don't let these things derail your overall intent. So you kind of be flexible along the way and encourage your audience to say, it's okay if not everything is working out. We're going to get there. We're going to, you know, adjust as need be. You know, if there's a big fail point, let's pivot from it. But, and that's where we'll kind of get into it, that if you're trying to really tightly tie attendance and assessment and these metrics to your video conference, you're setting yourself up for some frustration and failure there, as opposed to saying, what's the bigger picture? And if you talked about it in a face-to-face class, if you said, you know, everyone show of hands, how many understand something, and one student didn't raise their hand, you wouldn't stop. You wouldn't just break it down until they didn't do it. It's the same thing here. So we'll be flexible with it. I want to pivot over to the Jamboard, and I'm actually going to stop sharing with this here. So you should have the link for the Jamboard, and I'm going to give you a moment to kind of just, you know, contemplate, think about what we just went over in terms of best practices. You can put questions here. You can put your notes here if you want. You don't have to do anything with it, but it's 12:20. We're going to do 2 minutes. I prefer longer, but I want to give you that experience. Write some items there if you want, and then we can have a brief conversation on those practices and what they might mean to your teaching. All right, you're gonna get back in there. I'm gonna share the screen one more time. Let's see, got a couple of questions. Just want to touch base on the questions then. I appreciate you adding those in here. Is there a formula you follow for how much to share versus not? There's not a formula for it. I make the best practice of trying to share to break away from the share as much as possible. One thing you can consider there with that is think about an in-person session where someone has a set of slides and they put the slides up on the screen. And what does that do to your behavior? Your behavior, we naturally say, okay, well, we turn and we face that. That's our input device. And we're focused on those slides. Well, if the slides aren't the purpose at that point, let's say you stop presenting them and you're talking about something else, your users are still focused here. So stopping those slides immediately directs attention back to you. It's no different with the share. So if you can break away from that share, you're giving them notice, a clue to focus back on what you're saying and maybe what the group is saying. So it kind of depends there. If it's something slide heavy, again, providing those slides in advance can be helpful. Preference for Zoom polls, we're going to cover polling briefly, so we'll get to that in a moment. And then the Think Pair Share, also going to look at that, but the method for using Think Pair Share, if we have time today, would be utilizing the breakout rooms. And we can do that in a few different ways. Again, they can be pre-planned, or they can be just on the fly, and you can break them out like you've done before with that strategy, and bring people back in and share out their results, share by verbally, or actually share by a tool such as this. All right.
So there's a quick question from the chat.
Yeah.
So if students want recording, how do we do this while also following privacy laws?
Thank you for bringing that up. I read it while we were doing the Jamboard and then forgot about it. See how that goes. With that, what I would recommend is to do some editing of the recording. So if you recorded just if you're recording a Zoom, unfortunately, it does have this stream of users on the side. So you'd have a couple of options. If you need to get the users basically out of that presentation component, you could ask if it was muted, and that might take away from the class presentation itself. And then you could use an editing software to basically crop the screen to just the slides. However, again, that sort of takes away from the experience. You may do a second recording of it. I've done some of these before where there's been a lot of users in place, and even when I have recorded it, I found that the conversation is not something replicable. So after the session's done, I will just go into Zoom again and quickly go through my notes and go through the slide portion of it. So that's one way to do it. But yeah, it certainly is a challenge if you cannot share that. If we're sharing within like a private space like Canvas, you are allowed to share that. But if you make any of those links public, you've got to be concerned with that information. Okay. So this is the portion that, could take a long time. So we're going to look at them somewhat briefly, and then see what we can actually, practice with it as well. I should have prefaced that at the beginning, that, I'm having you test out a lot of different tools here. In an actual session, to be most effective, you should not use this many tools. Trying to give you a potpourri of like, okay, you've tried this and tried that, but for your sessions, focus on one or two and really get them comfortable with that. First thing I mentioned are back channels. Back channels there's lots of different ways to use these. They're basically any way that your audience can communicate with each other, or kind of put down those thoughts that pop in their head without waiting for the opportunity to kind of break in and communicate. And especially if you're the kind of presenter who can't, doesn't want distractions, wants to be able to get through a segment at a time, back channels are great. I wouldn't worry about them being off topic or, being distracting. If they want to do that, they're going to go and use their phones and do other things. This is honestly for those like, wow, this relates to something else in my class, or I have a question, or they may even reach out to another classmate and say like, do you want to work on this project together? Like, where are the opportunities for that? So it can be in the chat. Now the chat is very temporary. You know, when the session's done, that chat's gone. You can use something more permanent. You could set up a Jamboard like we did for notes. You can set up a Google Doc and say, hey, just write in the doc. Let the students know that, you know, these back channels are public or public to their class. So anything you say in there is, you know, there for class consumption. But it's a good way to organize the distractions so that you don't get too off subject. You can stay on pace, but also value that back channel. Don't just like give it to the students and say, I'm never going to read it. Give some pauses, take a look. Ask someone in the class, hey, over in the Google Doc, has there been anything we should discuss as a class? And give them that opportunity to engage. There was a question about polling earlier, about using Zoom polling. So we'll cover a little bit about the polling tools. My biggest kind of thing I always put out there is that these are for engagement. Don't try to use these for assessment. You know, you can ask a question, an understanding check question, but if you are using the polling questions for grading, you're kind of twisting what the intentionality is. It's to have the students be involved, have people say, okay, well, I want to be part of this and I want to contribute. When it becomes an assessment, now it's a different level. I'm doing this so that I get a grade or so that I don't get, you know, penalized for this. And the conversation is not going to be as rich around those answers. There's a few different tools out there. You know, the Zoom polls, I don't love the Zoom polls because you either have to set them up in advance through Zoom, which can be done. It's not too difficult to do, but you have to be the host on those sessions. You can't be a co-host, or you can write them on the fly, but writing a multiple choice question on the fly kind of derails everything if you think about it, because while I'm sitting here typing, everyone's attention is drifting. I showed you Answer Garden. I like that as a good way to kind of create those word walls, you know, if that's the type of thing you're looking for. Google Forms, if you're going to use more than one question. So hey, I want you to do these 4 questions. Also, it provides good analytics meaning it'll do like pie charts and bar graphs and things that you can visualize. And FastPoll is another free service that does some of those as well. So I tend to lean towards either Answer Garden or Google Forms, depending on my intention, but it's personal preference. In all these cases, I don't really keep the data. It's just something to converse about, to do something with those results. And I think that's the most important part. If you ask a question and then no one does anything with it, then how effective might it be? I'll pause there for a second. Any questions on that? I don't want to take over the presentation. Okay. A couple more tools. Whiteboards are another way that you can, you know, actually then I would say the next series of tools all kind of give students control of the screen, give students control of what we're talking about, what we're sharing right now. You know, a whiteboard, whether it's the Zoom whiteboard tool, which you can go to share and then whiteboard to find it, or something like Jamboard, it allows you to really go off script. It allows you to just say, you know, I've got a basic idea of where I need to go, but I want everyone else to engage. You know, I did a workshop, that's probably like 4 or 5 months ago, and I knew the audience pretty well, and I knew that like it was more a conversation than it was displaying facts. We did the entire thing through Jamboard. There was nothing else. And just, I was flipping up and said, okay, it's basically whiteboard, you know, flip chart paper, and say, here's our next chart. And we all drew on it and just said, okay, let's just go. But that was that type of session. So, you know, these whiteboards, anything sort of messy, anything that, you know, it's not going to come out perfect. This is a place to be for that. Don't expect this to look great, but it's a way to engage. Like a lot of these tools, I think that, you know, was brought up, you're not going to get great engagement to begin with. You got to be kind of persistent with the fact that we're going to use this and how we're going to use this to demonstrate it. And eventually, you'll see that those tools will catch on. But, at first, there's a fear of being the first person to do it. If I was to really, push that more, for example, I could have just called someone by their name and asked, hey, can you add something to this? It's like calling someone to the front of the room. And then as you do more of that, it can start to encourage that engagement. Screen sharing, I've been sharing my screen, but an effective strategy is to ask students to share their screens. This is the think, pair, share, but it's doing that by sharing out whatever you created. This is a scavenger hunt. You can ask, as a strategy, have students go online, find an article, find a reference to something, and then share what they found. You can share your entire screen, which I'm doing right now. I'm pretty comfortable with that. But if you're kind of not sure about what parts I should be sharing, you can share in an application like just Chrome or just Word, whatever you might be working through. But you can share, but they can share. And I think that's really what the one to keep in mind is allowing students to share their screens and what they've created. These are the kind of things that we do in meetings, in classes, face to face. I mentioned sort of mind mapping on there. I'm sure that we've all been in a session where you and 2 or 3 other people have been put to a whiteboard or a piece of paper and have had to map out something, and then your maps were stuck around the room and everyone looked and discussed. It's the same thing can be done using the screen sharing tool. Annotation, there is an option. You'll see, it's hard for me to show you in Zoom, but if you are the leader, you're going to see an annotate button, and you should be able to annotate as well. Yeah, you have annotation on right now. So I'll even open it up to that. Let's just kind of try this. So you should see annotation from your control panel. It's either at the bottom or under the More button, and it should give you a pencil, and you should be able to draw on the screen. So if you want to do that now, you can go ahead and do that. But the annotation, there we go. We've got a couple of drawings on there. It's not easy. It's not the most flexible tool. So don't expect people to draw anything very accurate. We've got a couple of nice eyes there though. But what I would say is you could simply put up a graphic organizer and say, all right, everyone, I want you to vote with your pencil. I want you to check a box over here. It's no different than doing a poll, but it's tactile. It's, oh, I actually am going to draw on here. I'm going to, let's circle the one we want to be on. Let's point to something on a document. Again, these are going to be rough. They're going to be ugly, but they're going to engage and get people involved. Also, you shouldn't do what I'm doing right now, which is talk through it, because most of you heard none of this. You were just drawing with the tools. That's okay as well, but you want to give that time to actually do the drawing as opposed to droning on. All right, we're going to stop the drawing though. I'm not going to hit stop on it, but we are going to move forward. Let's see. I do need to clear the annotation. Another option in terms of really giving students access, we've talked about sharing the screens, but you can actually give students control of your screen. So remote control is a way to kind of pass the chalk. If you're doing something where you want them to maybe interact with an application on your computer or solve a problem, work through something, you can use the remote control option. And when they have remote control, basically both of you do. You can fight with the mouse over the student if you need to. But they can control your screen. They can move things around. So you may have something, like I said, an application that you can't have, or that they don't have access to, but now you can give them access. Conversely, they can give you control of their screen. Now that's not something you should be asking for in a classroom. But if you're doing like like office hours and stuff, and maybe someone's having a problem with something, say, let me drive this for a minute, and then I'll give you back control. And I mentioned the breakout rooms, and it looks like we are going to have time to cover this. So you may have had experience with breakout rooms, maybe not. But breakout rooms are a way to do that small learning, particularly if you have larger classes. This is the get into pairs, get into small groups, do some discussion. Some things, oh, I jumped ahead here. Some things to think about with these breakout rooms in Zoom particularly is that they are confidential. They are never recorded. The chat isn't recorded. Nothing from that room is going to be brought back. And I know that I've gotten some faculty requests on, well, why can't we do that? Think about the same way that a class group session is. If you're to break into small groups, no one's going to each group and recording everything they say. So allow that conversation to bloom. You know, I put some different strategies that can be used here. You can do small group instruction. You can break them into groups based on their understanding. So you do a poll question and then assign them to groups. And then you can walk from group to group and say, okay, I'll do a little bit of a specific instruction here. You can do jigsaws where each group is assigned a topic to become an expert on or discuss. Then they go back to the main group and then they share out. Or reflections. I like to use breakout rooms after guest speakers. So in a classroom, we do the guest speaker and then immediately do breakout rooms, have them talk about what they heard, and then they come back. I find that I get a lot better participation than if I just said, does anyone have anything they want to share? Quick question in the chat. Is there a way we can do breakout rooms inside the breakout rooms? No, can't go that level with it. That would be kind of cool. So we are going to do a breakout room now just as an exercise. And in the breakout room, since we just covered tools and techniques, I'm going to just have you talk to the group that you're in. I think by the number of people here, it'll be 2 or 3 people per group. And is there a tool, is there a technique that's come up so far that you feel might be applicable to your field? And is there an idea that maybe that was sparked there? So we're going to take this for 5 minutes. And while, that takes up a good chunk of our time here, I will say anything less than 5 minutes really kind of squashes the communication. So often I've been in these sessions where we've done breakout rooms and they give us 2 minutes. By the time you get in and say hi to everyone, you're being kicked back out. So we'll take the 5 minutes here. I really want you to get a sense of the tool. And then I will bring everyone back in and we'll just do get a sense of your feedback. All right. Looks like we are back. First, I guess I want to say, especially if this is your first time doing this or you haven't had a lot of experience with it, any thoughts on the breakout rooms, whether, your experience in it or applications for your teaching practice?
My camera's weird. Oh, there we go. Hi.
I can see you.
I've never been on the inside of a breakout room. I put people in them. So
that was one of the reasons I wanted to do that, because I know sometimes we just work on the other side.
Yeah.
But and this is no judgment against the group we're in, but this hasn't been like, not everyone is like talking constantly, but how many of you talked more in your groups, or like turn the cameras on, said a few things, because it was just 2, 3 of you, and it's kind of awkward just to sit there in silence. It's a good way to kind of encourage some communication within your classes, because some people really are just going to open up in those instances, especially if you give them a purpose. We are going to the breakout room to do this, and then we're going to come out of the breakout room and you're going to do that. So I hope you enjoyed that or got some experience there. You actually were in there for 6 minutes. We did the 5 minutes plus the 1 minute warning, and it still probably felt brief. So you think about that, how much time you want to build in for breakout rooms. Particularly, Stacy and I were talking that when you don't know each other, there's a couple of minutes of feeling out introductions, and then you get into the topic, and now there's no time for it. So if it's their first time with each other, you got to bake that into the time estimates.
Hey, Mike,
Yeah.
Can I just ask a quick technical question?
Of course.
So I really liked that. I'm just wondering, what was it like on your end? Did you just randomly do this, or did you have to put people in piles?
So I use when you use the breakout room tool, by default, you can just hit automatically apply and you can just randomly throw people in rooms. You can actually manually sort and drag as well, which with here where I've got 8, 9 people is fine. But if I got 50, 100, I'm not dragging people. There is a way to pre-load rooms as well, but it's difficult. But if you're trying to do consistent groups, you can do that. I was able to communicate with you. So there's a global communication. So I sent the message to everybody at 2 minutes. And also on my end, I can jump into each room. So I could have clicked join and jumped in and said hello and jump back out on that.
Okay, cool. And when you set the rooms, it'll randomly, you can decide like how big you want them to be.
Yeah, it says like, I want X number of rooms, and then it just sorts it evenly.
Cool.
Yes. And what Melody mentioned there is that that everyone has to be like within a certain domain to do the pre-arrangements. It's something you do off the Zoom site itself prior to a meeting. So certainly can be done. You kind of ask yourself, is there, is it necessary for this activity or not? Because it is a little bit of prep work. All right, I'm going to share the screen again. I'm going to wrap up with the sort of class considerations. We've got about 10 minutes left. I want to give you some time there for questions as well. So, thinking about some of the techniques, thinking about what you can use, use this as a guideline, just as you're setting up these video conference experiences. First off, I talked before about knowing your system, but do an environmental check for yourself. Where will I be? What sounds will be out there? Having had to teach it or and do these sessions at home for so long, I reconfigured this room that I'm in because the sun was coming down and was blinding everything at a certain time. But I know that between 8 and 10 o'clock, I need to bring the shades down in certain ways. So I just, I know my environment. I know where the sound's coming from. Confirm your details. What are you going to be using? What's going to be non-standard? Making sure that works. Have a way to distribute those resources, whether you're using like Canvas and you have them up there, or, I sent out the Google Doc. I really encourage having something like that pre-planned. While you can, share each resource as you go in the chat, it's often easier just to say, here's everything. And I don't have to, keep finding the link and sending it back out. So plan yourself that way. And then very simply, right before you get started, everything you're going to use, have the tabs open already. Every document, every website, and then you can click through them. So it's basically a good check too. You go to open a link and you realize the link's broken. Well, it's better to do it before class than during. So get those things ready for yourself so that you're prepared to, for the session. During the class, if you're going to use any activity, why are you using it? And if it's just like, well, it's something to get them involved, but it's probably not good enough, because any sort of engagement activity, it carries with it inherent risk of the tool not working, of it not really matching the objective. So know why you're using it first if you're going to take that risk. I talked about speaking directly to your audience and using names. And these things can be difficult to do. Something I'm always continually working on myself. Knowing that, there isn't going to be 100% participation, and that's not a big deal. Don't let it derail your intention. And then you may have noticed something I've been doing here, which is to speak your actions, where I will literally tell you, and now we are going to go to the slides. Now I'm going to share the screen. I use those statements to kind of alert the audience because, attention may vary. Maybe there's something else happening in their room or they're off on another screen. If you let them know, and now we're going to do this, that will bring some people back in who may have drifted a little bit. It's not a criticism of that. So make your announcements of these things. Don't be subtle with it so that they realize, oh, I'm way behind. And then consider what you're going to do after. These classroom experiences don't end just with this video conference. If you are going to do recordings, how are you going to share them? When are you going to share them? And have you communicated that with your users? Anything you developed collaboratively, like in this case, like the Jamboard, or if you did a different document, you've done some brainstorming, how are you going to share that out so that if the users have access to what they created, if you want them to? Are you doing any post surveys, a way to collect feedback? So, if you're going to do that, I'd say periodically, every month or so, if you're doing a weekly class, put out a survey, put out a poll, do some sort of exit ticket where you'd ask people to provide some feedback. But also have a channel. Say like, we'll be doing these, I'll be collecting some information, but if you see something that needs to be improved or have a question, here's how to do this, and establish that. It's kind of part of your norm setting early on. And then just, reflection and adaptation. Think about how it went, think about what you might want to change. And you can sort of make those adjustments. And I know it kind of covered that briefly, but I wanted to really open this up now just to get your thoughts on it. Questions that still remain unanswered. If there's anything, let's see if there's anything over in the Jamboard. Nothing there, but I'm going to kind of throw it to the audience now, and we can use this last 5 or 6 minutes to have that conversation.
Hey, Mike,
Yeah.
Sean again. Just real quick. So I'm not sure if I'm the other. Well, I know I just in my breakout room is me and somebody else. We're postdocs who haven't actually taught a big class yet, and I'm just wondering, maybe just from your perspective, are there any kind of classic traps or pitfalls that we should try to avoid if we're, giving a seminar or a class or something? Like what are some things that we definitely should avoid?
And I should have put that in there. Large class learning is a different variant on this, and it is always a challenge, no matter what you're working with. That is an engagement there is a little bit different. I think when you're dealing with larger groups, you recognize that you're not going to be able to get everyone's response back. So you might do questions if you're doing some audience polling that are more multiple choice or yes, no ones where you can get quick survey results back. Or if you are asking them to put in certain text responses, you're going to say, well, I'm just going to survey that list and just pick out a few to discuss. Would be a particular strategy for that. But yeah, I mean, recognizing maybe like when you're talking about the communication norms and strategies, interruptions may not work for this, or you may have to be more intentional about times to communicate because there's just the scale of it's too much. I'm not worried about 20, 30 people in the room, but I've done a few of these workshops with 200, and in that case, I've had to have someone in the chat really just monitoring that because it's not tenable to manage both.
Thanks. Any pitfalls for small groups too? Any things we should avoid? Particular.
I think that the biggest thing for small groups is to not treat it like a big group. Like in a small group, definitely try to get to know everyone. Like I know we had a lot to cover today, and we weren't going to meet a second time. So I apologize for not really taking the time to have everyone introduce themselves. But in a small group, take that time. Treat people like it's personal. Because you think about it just being around a small table, you wouldn't act as if you're like at distance from them. So that knowing your audience and the size of your audience, you got to make that adjustment.
Thanks.
Any other questions or comments you want to add in here? I want to make sure everyone's got an opportunity to contribute. Okay, well, if you don't have them at this time, you can always reach out to me. On the Linktree document is my email. It's mjforder@vcu.edu. Something pops up or you've got a question, I'm always happy to jump in. Those resources will be up and live. The slides and the feed and the Jamboard will be there for you to access whenever you'd like. The answer garden will expire, but that was just more of a initial activity. And with that, I'll put it to Stacy. Is there anything else you want to wrap up with the session?
I think, well, thank you for giving us so much information and such different, I love all the variety of case uses and the different options available. I feel like we can definitely take something out of that. For the postdocs in the room and for anyone else, just a reminder that this is the kickoff of our How To Talks by Postdoc series, which this year is a virtual series for the month of March. So every Monday in March at noon, a postdoc will be presenting to us on how to do something. So we've got a great lineup and we are looking forward to it. We will